What happens when a defending champion's carefully constructed roster meets an opportunity too tantalizing to ignore, even when their superstar sits on the sideline? Good evening, basketball obsessives, and welcome back to the channel where we dissect the high-stakes chess matches that separate championship organizations from pretenders playing checkers. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into a trade scenario that's equal parts audacious and logical. A three-team blockbuster that could reshape the Eastern Conference playoff picture while simultaneously solving Golden State's most frustrating personnel puzzle. The Boston Celtics, navigating the treacherous waters of life without Jayson Tatum, stand at a crossroads that will define their season. And sitting in Golden State's rotation, buried beneath inconsistency and organizational frustration, is a 22-year-old athletic marvel named Jonathan Kuminga, who might just be the answer to questions Brad Stevens didn't even know he was asking. Let's establish the stakes immediately. The Celtics aren't just good, they're legitimately dangerous even without their best player. But here's the brutal truth that keeps Stevens awake at night. Being dangerous and being championship ready are two entirely different propositions. Jayson Tatum's absence has exposed both strengths and vulnerabilities in Boston's roster construction. They've discovered depth they didn't know they possessed. They've watched role players step into expanded responsibilities with varying degrees of success. But they've also identified gaps, defensive versatility concerns, athletic explosiveness at the wing position, and the perpetual question of whether they have enough two-way impact players to survive 4 grueling playoff rounds. Anthony Simons embodies this dilemma perfectly. The man is undeniably talented, a microwave scorer with legitimate shot creation ability, and the kind of offensive confidence that can swing momentum in crucial moments. But here's where the romance ends and reality intrudes. Joe Mazzulla doesn't fully trust him. And in the playoffs, when rotations tighten and every possession becomes a battle of wills, trust is the currency that matters most. Simons' defensive inconsistency isn't just a minor flaw, it's a potential playoff liability that opposing coaches will exploit mercilessly. We've seen it countless times. Talented offensive players hunted relentlessly on the defensive end, forced into impossible situations until their coach has no choice but to bench them in crunch time. That's not a recipe for championship success. Enter Jonathan Kuminga, Golden State's maddeningly inconsistent, frustratingly talented, occasionally brilliant 22-year-old wing who represents everything modern NBA teams crave and everything that drives coaching staffs insane. Let's talk about what Kaminga brings to the table when he's locked in. Elite athleticism that allows him to defend multiple positions, the physical tools to guard everyone from quick point guards to power forwards in the post, explosive finishing ability around the rim, improving three-point shooting that keeps defenses honest, the kind of two-way potential that makes general managers salivate. Now, let's talk about the other side of the coin. Inconsistent decision-making, stretches where he disappears offensively, defensive lapses that suggest concentration issues rather than physical limitations. The kind of frustrating unpredictability that's led to him being benched multiple times this season despite his obvious talent. But here's the critical insight. Context matters enormously. Kaminga's struggles in Golden State's system don't necessarily predict his performance in Boston's structure. The Warriors need him to be a consistent secondary scorer alongside an aging Stephen Curry. The Celtics would be asking him to be a defensive specialist and athletic finisher alongside elite offensive creators. Those are fundamentally different roles requiring different skill sets. The financial structure is equally compelling. Kaminga's $22.5 million cap hit comes with a team option for next season, making him essentially an expiring contract. For a Celtics organization that just spent an entire offseason creating financial flexibility, that's not just attractive, it's perfect. You get to evaluate him for the remainder of the season and the playoffs, then decide whether he's worth a long-term commitment. Zero long-term risk. Here's where this gets deliciously complicated. Boston can't simply swap Simons for Kaminga straight up. The money doesn't work, and Golden State would laugh them off the phone. This requires a third team willing to absorb salary and facilitate the transaction. Enter the Utah Jazz, currently in full rebuilding mode and perfectly positioned to play matchmaker. The proposed framework looks something like this. Boston Celtics receive Jonathan Kuminga, $22.5 million, team option 2026 to 27, Kyle Anderson, $9.2 million, non-guaranteed 2026 to 27, Golden State Warriors receive Sam Hauser, young third asset from Boston, the critical variable Utah Jazz receive. That third asset is where this entire deal lives or dies. Boston's available pieces include Hugo Gonzalez, Baylor Shireman, Xavier Tillman, Luka Garza, Josh Minot, Nemias Quetta, Chris Boucher, and Jordan Walsh. Each represents a different level of organizational commitment and future value. Gonzalez is far and away the most valuable asset in that group, a legitimate young prospect with real upside. Including him would almost certainly get Golden State's attention. But it would also represent a massive overpay for Boston. Surrendering Gonzalez, Hauser, and Simons for essentially a one-year rental of Kaminga and Anderson? That's organizational malpractice, the kind of panic move that gets general managers fired. On the opposite end of the spectrum, players like Shireman, Tillman, or Garza are roster filler. Bodies that might contribute in garbage time, but won't move the needle for a Warriors team desperately trying to maximize Curry's remaining championship window. The sweet spot likely involves someone like Jordan Walsh, Josh Minot, or Chris Boucher. Players with some value, but not so much that Boston mortgages their future. The question becomes, is that enough to entice Golden State? Let's flip the script and examine this from the Warriors' vantage point, because understanding their motivations is critical to evaluating whether this deal has any chance of happening. First, the Kaminga situation has clearly deteriorated. Multiple benchings, reported frustration on both sides, inconsistent playing time despite his talent. These aren't signs of a healthy player-organization relationship. When dysfunction reaches this level, moving on often becomes the best option for everyone involved. If you're going to trade him anyway, you want to maximize return while you still have leverage before the entire league knows you're desperate to move him. Second, Sam Hauser represents exactly what Golden State needs. He's an elite three-point shooter who doesn't require plays designed for him, fits seamlessly into any offensive system, and is on a team-friendly contract through 2028 to 29. In Golden State's motion offense, surrounded by Curry's gravity and constant screening actions, Hauser would thrive. He'd get wide-open catch-and-shoot opportunities all game long. Third, the financial flexibility matters. Moving Kaminga's $22.5 million opens up roster flexibility for future moves. If they can acquire Hauser's shooting while shedding Kaminga's inconsistency, that's addition by subtraction. But here's the brutal reality: other teams will be circling. If Boston's best offer is Hauser, Nyang, and Jordan Walsh, some other franchise will likely trump that package. The Lakers, Pelicans, and several other teams have been linked to Kaminga. Competitive pressure inevitably pushes prices higher. This trade represents a fascinating philosophical question about roster construction. Do you prioritize known production or upside potential? Sam Hauser is the definition of a known commodity. You know exactly what you're getting every single night. Consistent three-point shooting, career 42.3% from deep, smart off-ball movement, solid team defense, and zero drama. He's not winning you a game single-handedly, but he's also not losing you one. He's the reliable role player every championship team needs. Jonathan Kuminga is volatility personified. Some nights, he looks like a future all-star, attacking the rim with ferocious athleticism and defending multiple positions with intensity and intelligence. Other nights, he looks completely lost, forcing bad shots, making questionable decisions, and appearing disengaged defensively. But here's the critical factor that tips the scales. Kaminga's ceiling is exponentially higher than Hauser's. If Joe Mazzulla and Boston's coaching staff can unlock consistent production from Kaminga, if they can harness that raw talent and channel it into winning basketball, you're talking about a potential difference maker in playoff series against Milwaukee, Philadelphia, or whoever emerges from the Western Conference. The addition of Kyle Anderson sweetens the deal considerably. Anderson is the ultimate glue guy. High basketball IQ, versatile defender, capable playmaker, and someone who makes winning plays that don't show up in the box score. He's not flashy, but he's exactly the type of player championship teams need in their rotation, especially in playoff environments where execution and intelligence matter more than raw athleticism. Let's zoom out and examine the bigger picture. The Celtics aren't making this move for the regular season, they're making it for June. When Tatum returns, presumably later this season or for the playoffs, Boston's rotation would suddenly feature 3 elite-level wing defenders: Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kaminga. That's the kind of defensive versatility that wins championships. Imagine the matchup flexibility. Kaminga on Giannis Antetokounmpo, Brown on Damian Lillard, Tatum roaming as a help defender. Or Kaminga on Jimmy Butler, Brown on Bam Adebayo in switching situations, Tatum on Tyler Herro. The ability to switch across multiple positions without significant defensive drop-off is invaluable in modern playoff basketball. Offensively, Kaminga wouldn't need to be a primary creator. He'd be asked to finish, attack closeouts, and make simple reads, exactly the role that maximizes his strengths while minimizing his weaknesses. With Tatum and Brown commanding defensive attention, Kaminga would get cleaner looks at the rim and more favorable matchups. The financial flexibility created by moving Hauser's long-term deal is equally valuable. Boston would go from being capped out through 2029 to having significant flexibility after this season. That positions them to make additional moves in future off-seasons without being hamstrung by salary cap constraints, critical for a team trying to maintain championship pension for the next 5 to 7 years. The Boston Celtics stand at a fascinating crossroads that will define not just this season, but potentially the next several years of their championship window. They're good enough to compete right now, even without Tatum, but good enough to compete and good enough to win it all are separated by a chasm that swallowed countless talented teams. Jonathan Kuminga represents a high-risk, high-reward opportunity to significantly upgrade their roster's defensive versatility, athletic ceiling, and two-way impact. The framework exists for a 3-team deal that could work for everyone involved. Boston gets their versatile wing defender, Golden State gets shooting and roster flexibility, Utah gets an expiring contract to flip or evaluate. But the devil is in the details, specifically what third asset Boston is willing to include. If Brad Stevens can pull this off without surrendering Hugo Gonzalez, it might be one of the shrewdest deadline moves we see all season. The kind of calculated gamble that separates good executives from great ones. If he has to include Gonzalez, the calculation becomes infinitely more complex, potentially tipping from shrewd to reckless. One thing is absolutely certain: the Celtics aren't content to simply tread water until Tatum returns. They're exploring every avenue, examining every possibility, and looking for any edge that might transform them from Eastern Conference contender to legitimate championship favorite. Jonathan Kuminga might just be that edge, the missing piece that unlocks their defensive potential and gives them the versatility to match up with anyone in a 7-game series. Now, it's your turn to be the general manager. Would you pull the trigger on this 3-team blockbuster if you're Brad Stevens? What's the maximum asset you'd include to make this happen? And Warriors fans, what would it take for you to feel good about moving on from the Kaminga era? Is Hauser and a role player enough, or are you holding out for more? Drop your complete trade analysis, your counterproposals, and your brutally honest assessments in the comments below. This is the kind of complex, multi-layered trade scenario that separates casual observers from true front office minds, and we want to hear every perspective, every angle, every creative solution you can devise. If this deep dive into championship-level roster construction has expanded your understanding of the trade market's intricate dynamics and the calculated risks teams take in pursuit of banners, smash that like button and subscribe for more elite-level basketball analysis that goes beyond surface-level takes. Your engagement fuels this community, and together we're building the smartest basketball conversation on the platform. Until next time, keep your eyes on the trade deadline, because the next franchise-altering move might be just one phone call away.